Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Marvel just announced the new version of the Silver Surfer and Galactus in the Fantastic Four movie. Naturally, everybody has a ton of questions because of who they picked to be the new Silver Surfer. It's going to be an alternate universe version of the character because of where and when the movie is meant to take place in the timeline, in the multiverse, just in general. The movie is meant to heavily figure into the lead-up to Avengers Secret Wars, just like Deadpool and Wolverine, which literally just teased Secret Wars with a comic book from real-life Marvel Comics Secret Wars run, which also had Doctor Doom on the cover, who is also in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie. So you start to see how this is all connected, this is all building to Secret Wars. But we'll break it all down and why they specifically chose this alternate version of the character to be Galactus' herald during the movie. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We'll get a new Deadpool and Wolverine trailer pretty soon. There's actually a bunch of Fantastic Four Easter eggs during that, but they're mostly for the Fox Fantastic Four movies because of where that movie takes place. But you probably saw recently in your feeds, Marvel announced the new Silver Surfer in the movie is going to be the Shala Ball version of the character from the comics, played by Julia Garner from Ozark, not the Norrin Rad version of the character, who most people think of when they think of Silver Surfer. She was great on Ozark if you never saw that series, but naturally there's a lot of confusion, especially from casual fans that haven't read all the comics, about why Marvel went this direction. Like, why would they do it with an alternate version of the character? Why not just do Norrin Rad? The main reason is because the Fantastic Four movie is mostly going to take place in an alternate universe. It's not going to be set inside the MCU. The movie won't be a traditional origin story movie like the previous Fantastic Four movies. When the movie begins, this Fantastic Four team on their version of Earth will have already been a thing, having adventures for a long time. The movie set during 1963, 1964, and during that period in history, they'll be like their Earth's version of the main superhero team. Same way the Avengers inside the MCU became super popular celebrities around the world, like regular people on the street around the MCU would go around talking about them being fanboys, wearing merch based on them, referencing them in casual conversations on the street. Like regular people in the MCU knew about the snap.
Do you mind taking a picture with us?
Oh, sure. Start figuring out where he is.
So it's the same deal with the Fantastic Four team in their alternate universe. Like everybody knows who they are, they're huge celebrities. Franklin Richards and Valeria Richards will already exist. Reed Richards, Sue Storm's children, they'll have been married for a long time too, which is why the characters look a little bit older. Like Pedro Pascal isn't that old, but he looks older than you think that they would have cast normally. Typically when Marvel casts really big comic book characters, you expect them to cast a little bit younger. But because of where that movie takes place in the lifespan of that team's existence, it also explains why Doctor Doom is in the movie too, because he's such a big part of their origin and a big part of Valeria Richards' origin. So when the movie picks up, you have to imagine they've already had a lot of their own comic book adventures, they've already had a lot of run-ins with their Doctor Doom. So during the movie, we're seeing them have to face Galactus and his herald at the time, his version of Silver Surfer, Shala Ball. And because the team's already had so many adventures, this is like their Thanos Infinity Gauntlet level threat coming to consume and destroy the Earth, like a Thanos level threat. Same way in all the Avengers movies, the stakes kept rising, like Avengers Infinity War was after a couple other Avengers movies, like they'd had bigger adventures before that. Same deal with the Fantastic Four in their universe. It's not like the team forms and then the next day Galactus shows up. This is like happening much later in the team's lifespan. And part of the reason why Marvel didn't make Norrin Rad the Silver Surfer of that movie is because they probably intended to do Norrin Rad in the MCU eventually, and during the Fantastic Four movie, they're going to have an Empire Strikes Back, Avengers Infinity War style kind of WTF ending.
You should have gone for the head.
A lot of people wondered when they heard Galactus was going to be the main villain of the movie, were like, how could people in the 1960s with that level of technology, even with a genius like Reed Richards, face Galactus without the help of a bunch of other superheroes, because the Avengers aren't meant to exist yet on their Earth? The very simple answer is they probably do not stop Galactus, and that's the main reason for also setting the movie in an alternate universe, so that we can see what it looks like when Galactus actually does wind up destroying the Earth, just not the MCU version of Earth. So you have to imagine the Fantastic Four managed to escape, survive somehow into Secret Wars along with Galactus, maybe not his current herald in the movie, so that during Secret Wars, when all the characters start coming together on a version of Battleworld, which we see in the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer. If it wasn't clear, they're using the Void from Loki as a version of Battleworld because of the way it works inside the MCU, like the whole logic, the mechanics of the planet. It's basically like a dumping ground for all of reality. So you get all these different multiverse characters being dumped there. Most of the Deadpool and Wolverine movie is meant to take place there, so they're setting it up as a version of Battleworld from the Secret Wars comics. Once Secret Wars actually does go down, they end the movie similar way to the comic book Secret Wars ending. They fix the multiverse, but Marvel is also supposed to be using that to reboot the MCU. We've been talking about this big MCU reboot coming up.
I smell what you're stepping in, Sensei. Your little cinematic universe is about to change forever.
Kevin Feige will then use the reboot to turn the MCU into a more comic book accurate version of the 616 universe where all the heroes, all the villains have always existed in the same place together this whole time. There've been a lot of hardcore comic book fans out there that have also been complaining about Kevin Feige calling the MCU the 616 universe in the last couple of big movies. There's a number of reasons why they need to reboot the Marvel movies, but one of them is to create a more comic book accurate looking universe of movies, where they bring all the new characters that they've introduced the last couple of years, including this new Fantastic Four team, and put them on that main Earth along with Galactus, but then they can introduce Galactus's next herald, the actual Norrin Radd, and use him going forward in the movies. So essentially, Marvel's doing this alternate universe version of the Fantastic Four team. They don't want to burn their Norrin Radd during that movie, kill him off, and then not be able to use him again in the future. They probably want to kill Galactus' herald in the movie, probably by sacrificing herself like Silver Surfer did during the Chris Evans Fantastic Four movies. So it just makes more sense for them to use a different version of the character so that when you do introduce Norrin Radd, it doesn't feel weird. Like, wait a minute, didn't we just kill him off? Why are you introducing him again? Now, in the comics, her backstory is a little bit weird. The version of Shala Bal that they're using in the movie is meant to be from an alternate universe in the comics who gained part of the power cosmic from Norrin Radd after he became Silver Surfer and Galactus' herald. He rebelled against Galactus, he punished him, and then he cycled through a couple different heralds and then eventually came to her and selected her as the next herald for a little while. In the main 616 universe, she was the Empress of Norrin Radd's original home planet and became his love interest. She was heavily featured during the Silver Surfer cartoon in the 90s, so you might remember the character if you watched that series.
It is time.
I love you.
Galactus, take me with him.
I bestow upon you a portion of my own power cosmic. Norrin Radd exists no more. You are newborn, my herald.
They actually just included that version of the character in the new Marvel animation intro that's playing in front of all the X-Men 97 episodes. That's the version from the 90s series. I don't know how much of her comic book backstory they're going to be using in the movie because she will be alternate universe version of the character, so they can just kind of wave their hand over a lot of that and just say that her backstory is completely different in that universe. They have not announced who's playing the new version of Galactus yet, but they were a couple people that were supposedly in the running. They're still trying to get either Javier Bardem or Antonio Banderas to play his voice, so either you have the Puss in Boots version of Galactus or like the darker version of Galactus. I think most people would prefer the darker, edgier version of Galactus, but either one of them would be great. Physically, though, like I said, it just makes sense that they do a more comic book accurate looking version of him, which does seem a little bit crazier, but because the entire movie is set in 1963, like the whole vibe of the movie is meant to be a little more over the top, it all makes sense, like it fits with the tone of the film.
The scale is again in balance. All is as it was.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
There've been a couple times when they've almost used Galactus and Silver Surfer in previous Marvel movies. Thor: Love and Thunder is probably the most recent example of that. Like, there was a deleted scene where they had this entire sequence, like a montage, showing you the development of Jane Foster's version of Thor as she starts to figure out her powers. There are about 6 months that go by where she has the power of Thor before she actually runs into Thor himself. During that time, she was going to have a montage facing a bunch of different monsters, battles, other big characters from space. One of them was going to be Galactus, like you can very clearly see here, very comic book accurate looking version of Galactus, but I think they were smart to remove this from the movie because it would have been a really weird, little too comedic way to introduce the Galactus character. People were already upset enough about that movie, like you don't want to ruin Galactus by trying to introduce him in some over-the-top comedic kind of way like this. But it does look like Marvel is now doubling down and doing Thor 5 like a much more hardcore version of Thor with a totally different director and a totally different writing team. Hopefully that will redeem the character, but because there's such a strong connection between Thor and Silver Surfer in the comics that go way, way back in the classic comics, hopefully we'll actually see those characters in some way during Thor 5. They still haven't confirmed who's playing the new version of Doctor Doom, but because he's not going to be the main villain of the movie, a lot of people are only expecting him to show up at the end of the movie and might wind up surviving to Battleworld. That might be why the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer teased the Secret Wars comic book with Doctor Doom on the cover. Now that was more of a God Emperor Doom teaser because he was such a big part of comic book Secret Wars. So you can make all the theories you want about how they're setting up this alternate universe version of Doctor Doom to be the God Emperor Doom during their version of Secret Wars because of the way they're pivoting away from the Kang character. Supposedly, Marvel is still planning on using the Council of Kangs in some way with some recasting for Avengers 5. They'll wrap up the Kang storyline, introduce another bigger villain for their Secret Wars as they lead up into that movie. They're probably going to change the title of Avengers 5 too. They could just wind up changing that to Secret Wars Part 1, but I'm assuming that by the end it'll be like Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, where you might remember if you were in Hall H Comic-Con when they debuted the very first teaser for Avengers Infinity War, they actually debuted it as Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. It wasn't until a little while later till they actually broke the story of both of the movies that they decided to completely change the titles because the movies felt so different. So they might spread the Secret Wars story over a couple Avengers movies and just change the titles for the movies. But it was reported by the trades that after Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania disappointed in the box office, Marvel had their big story retreat, and during that retreat, they discussed replacing the Kang character as like the big overarching villain in the MCU with a version of Doctor Doom. One of the problems they run into with that, like they could use this alternate version from the Fantastic Four movie and start setting him up to become a version of God Emperor Doom in Secret Wars. But here's the problem, they don't have that much time before actual Avengers 5 and Secret Wars come out, so they really do have to start doubling down on developing the character in some movies before that. Now there have been a lot of reports about them doing Black Panther 3 a little bit sooner. They could introduce Doctor Doom in a bigger way during that movie. We've got Doctor Strange 3, they could introduce him in a bigger way during that movie. So there are a lot of really big places that they could put the character where it makes sense. Like he's a man of technology and a man of magic. So he works in Iron Man, like technology-based stories, but he also works in Doctor Strange, like magic-based stories. One of the funny things too is if you've never actually heard his rant on Doctor Doom, Ben Mendelsohn, who was just in Secret Invasion, even though that series was terrible, he is the biggest stan of Doctor Doom and just went off on how much he loves the character. Even though I don't think there's any way that they're going to let him be the new Doctor Doom, he definitely understands the character, like he gets it. Everybody let me know in the comments if they're introducing Doctor Doom during this new Fantastic Four movie in the alternate universe, his age needs to be about the same as Pedro Pascal's. Let me know who you want to play the character if he'll be about that same age. They're going to be filming the movie for a while, so we should start getting some footage from the actual set. When we do get some footage, I will start doing some more videos. There's a bunch of big stuff coming up. We're in the middle of X-Men episodes. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss anything. Everybody click here for my new Deadpool and Wolverine video, and click here for all my X-Men episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.